Salutations! Welcome to Learning the Language of Literacy. My name is Sophia Lee, and today I'm here to do my August 2015 reading wrap-up. So August was another fantastic reading month. I managed to actually complete 14 books, and out of those there were 12 novels, 1 book in verse, and 1 graphic novel, which I consider just claps for me, because if you've seen my June and July wrap-ups, I have not been doing so well, but I'm back in the game, baby, and I'm gonna go full force, full speed ahead into September when school starts, because even though there's school, that does not mean my expectations will go down. I mean, I actually manage to read the most when I'm busy, which I find like a really weird fact, but because of the pressure and things going on in my life, I use reading as an escape and, of course, a way to procrastinate and not do my homework. This will be great for a future English teacher to watch. Anyways, the month of August is pretty much a model reading month in terms of I want all months to be like this, because I just hit so many of those New Year's resolutions that I promised myself I would fulfill. I actually managed to reread a novel. I listened to around 4 or 5 audiobooks. I read an adult science fiction novel, and I finally started the Mortal Instruments series. I'm halfway through it at this point, and I'm absolutely obsessed. Thank you so much, Thomas, for pushing me to read it. Anyways, because I have 14 books to talk about, I'm going to jump into it right now. The first book I read this month was actually one that I considered DNFing multiple times, and that was The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Lavender by Leslye Walton. The thing you have to know about this novel is that you want to read it for the writing and for the characters, because there is legitimately no plot. The story follows a semblance of a timeline, but besides that, there really isn't like, this is your exposition, this is your rising action, your climax, your falling action. There's none of that. The first third of the book actually doesn't follow Ava Lavender. Every member of the Lavender family has some inexplicable either power or ability or just something really strange about them. Ava, for example, is born with wings and she can't fly, but this does impact the story itself. And I would be cautioned about going into this novel because it's a weird magical realism, historical fantasy mix. The story drags at times, and because there's no plot, you kind of think it sometimes, well, why am I still reading this? But I would recommend it for a beautifully written novel. The second book I read this month is on the spectrum of LGBT that we don't normally hear from, and that is T for transgender. The book was Luna by Julianne Peters. I actually read Keeping You a Secret in 2014. I didn't enjoy it that much. I thought it was just an average LGBT novel and I didn't feel that much special about it. But Luna, on the other hand, while I wasn't blown away by it, I enjoyed the story and I sincerely respected the characters themselves. This book is told from a girl named Reagan's perspective. Her older brother Liam's only desire and only wish in the entire world is to be a girl. At nighttime he transforms, puts on classically female clothing and makeup and does his hair and calls himself Luna, and that is his true identity, which a lot of the characters struggle with throughout the novel. It's as much about Luna as it is about Reagan because of the dynamics going on between them and the impact that his transgenderism is having on her. And I definitely think it's a good book to read if you want to educate yourself on the topic. Then I marathoned the first half of the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare, City of Bones, City of Ashes, and City of Glass, which is actually the original trilogy because if you didn't know, while there were some points in the story where I felt it dragged a little bit, I did not ever think there's so much world building, I feel like I can never go forward in this story and this will never be worthwhile to read. And I was so pleasantly surprised. I give City of Bones a solid 4 out of 5 stars, City of Ashes 4.5, and City of Glass 4 out of 5 stars. And if you haven't heard of this yet, I don't know where you've been living, maybe under a rock, considering this is the urban fantasy series of young adult fiction, but it follows 15-year-old Clare who's been living a completely normal life in New York City. One day she and her best friend Simon go to this club called Pandemonium, and she witnesses these strange people clad in black with all these strange tattoos known as runes later on in the story, killing a demon. Her curiosity is obviously piqued, and she actually meets one of the strange boys again very soon in the story after the two of them go back to her New York City apartment and they discover that her mother has been kidnapped, and what they encounter there is a Ravener demon, which are bad news. He brings her back to what's called the Institute and introduces her to the entire Shadowhunter world, where she learns that Shadowhunters are these humans who have been blessed by the angel and have the ability to fight really well and apply runes to themselves, which are a certain type of magic. If you're thinking it's just another young adult series you don't want to read, I've got to tell you that it's not. Because first of all, Cassie Clare's stories are just hilarious and they have me laughing out loud so many times. Her writing is gorgeous and fluid and easy to read, and just, if you haven't read it, just give City of Bones a shot. I buddy read City of Bones with my friends Bella and Alex, and while they weren't the most impressed by it, I will be pushing the rest of the series on them because it just gets better and better. Obviously, I'm going to marathon the second half of the series in September, and I cannot wait to tell you my entire thoughts. Then I started another Jenny Han series, and that is The Summer I Turned Pretty. I only gave this book 2 out of 5 stars, which I was really disappointed by because I just didn't feel it. I absolutely adore the To All the Boys I Loved Before duology, but with The Summer I Turned Pretty, the main character, Belly, just felt so immature. And I've been her age, and that's not what people her age think about. Her name is Belly. Like, that alone screams immaturity. I know that was a common complaint with Lara Jean, but Lara Jean is like 80 years old in comparison. Every summer she goes with her family to a place called Cousins Beach. But this is the first summer that things are slightly different because her brother's not with her. For the first time is noticed by her mother's best friend's 2 sons, Connor and Jeremiah. Sorry, his name's Conrad. She's always had feelings for Conrad, but this is the summer that Jeremiah starts paying attention to her. Everything catalytic also always happens in the summer, and it's where she most noticeably grows up. Then I read a book that was extremely reminiscent of Winter Girls by Laurie Halse Anderson, and that was Paperwhite by Meg Haston. It follows a 17-year-old girl named Stevie who is actually in rehab for severe eating disorder. Almost a year ago, her brother passed away in a car crash that she thinks is her fault, and upon the 1-year anniversary of her brother's death arriving, she wants to kill herself. Her story is gut-wrenching and vivid and graphic, and she's going through so much pain. If you're going to read an eating disorder novel, I would highly recommend this one because things just feel so real, and Haston puts you in Stevie's position. And the good part of the story is that you see her ascent into a better, more positive mindset. You don't often see these in eating disorder books, and when you do, a lot of times they're rushed and hurried and you feel like you don't feel the full effect. But with Stevie, it feels like there is just this click, then there's a small but steady upward motion into who she's meant to be as a character and where she's meant to be mentally. Then I read the last Colleen Hoover book that I needed to be caught up with every single first book in the series that Colleen Hoover has written, and that was Confess, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. I've read a lot and seen a lot of reviews of Confess, and people didn't love it quite as much. I was absolutely blown away by it. As always with Colleen Hoover, all of her novels are good, but it really just boils down to which one you relate to most. And the main character of this one, Auburn, experienced a young love, and as someone who in this year alone had her first boyfriend as well as broke up with her first ever boyfriend, I felt such a palpable connection between me and Auburn. The male protagonist of the story, Owen, is a painter. They have full color images of his work on the novel, and what's special about him is that every painting he paints is actually based off of anonymous confessions that he's received, and in part Colleen Hoover actually requested anonymous confessions from her readers and people in general, and that's what she incorporated into the story. The next book I read this month was actually one that I listened to as an audiobook in its entirety, and that was Gloria O'Brien's History of the Future by A.S. King. Gloria O'Brien is quite decorated as a YA novelist, but when I read Everybody Sees the Ants by her last year, I was just confused, basically. And again, with Gloria O'Brien's History of the Future, I was confused as well, because she has all these hints of magical realism. The way she writes it and the way that her characters deal with it, you would think that it's not a magical element, but just part of the story, which I respect immensely. But this follows, obviously, Gloria O'Brien, and she and her best friend drink the juice of a dead bat, which is the weird part, and because of it, whenever they make eye contact with people, they can see their history and their future. With this newfound ability, she sees that there's going to be a civil war in the future, one that will completely wreck everything and make America regress to basically the 1600s or something along those lines, where women have absolutely no rights and the earth has gone to hell. My favorite part of the story was actually Gloria herself, because she had such a strong, independent feminist voice. She did not give a crap about anyone else, but she didn't judge them either. And then I read a book that's most likely making it onto my top 15 books of 2015 because I absolutely loved it. Gave it a full 5 out of 5 stars, and I know a lot of other people have as well. And that is Emmy and Oliver by Robin Benway. I actually read Also Known As back in 2014, and I I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I gave it an average 3 out of 5 stars. I also met the author herself, and at that point I was just like, cute spy story, whatever. But Emmy and Oliver changed all of that because it was absolutely breathtaking and emotional, and it was just the pinnacle of contemporary that every author who wants to write a hard-hitting contemporary should aspire to. Emmy and Oliver actually share a birthday, and their families and themselves have been best friends for a very long time until one day when Oliver is 7 years old, he gets kidnapped by his dad. The story fast forwards to 10 years later, and he is actually found and comes back to his hometown, and everyone is basically just overwhelmed with his return because they all picture him as this 7-year-old boy and who he was when he was 7, and when he turns out obviously not to be like he was back then, everyone is kind of thrown into a tizzy and doesn't really know how to treat him. Emmy, however, is ecstatic that her childhood best friend is back, and she's really the person that he comes to confide in. Eventually they fall in love because there were even some inklings of romanticism back when they were 7. Next up, I read the graphic novel that I think the majority of BookTube read this month, and that is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. I honestly don't know why I keep reading graphic novels, and I came to the realization that I just don't like them very much. I don't like the format, I don't like how little text there is, I don't like how many pictures there are, even though it is called a graphic novel. My eyes just skip to all the different text, and I don't really take the time to appreciate the pictures either. That's why I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars, but I legitimately think if you enjoy graphic novels that you would like this, and I've just come to the conclusion finally in August that graphic novels aren't the kind of book for me. This follows a girl named Nimona who basically shows up on this villain's door and says, I want to be your sidekick. She turns out to have the power of shape-shifting, and she has a very nefarious mind and is actually a bigger instigator for evil than the actual villain himself. Essentially, she tries to take over the world and kill a lot of people. Then I read the book in verse, and that was What My Mother Doesn't Know by Sonya. I gave it a 1.5 out of 5 stars. I didn't see the point of this novel whatsoever. I can't even remember what the main character's name is, and I just read it. The main character's name is Sophie. The whole way to synopsize this is that she is in high school. She's around, I think, 15, 16, I don't know, I don't really care either. And she just falls in love with a lot of guys because every time she sees a new attractive person, she makes out with them and she wants to date them. The reason that it's titled the way it is because she does this thing midway through the story, which she really shouldn't have, but of course she doesn't want her mother to know. And I don't think any mother would want to know that her daughter is basically serial dating their entire town of eligible bachelors. And one day she connects with this guy who is seen in this one light, but then because of the situation she meets him in, she sees him in an entirely different one, and she thinks maybe this guy is worth a shot. That's basically the story. I did not enjoy it. Then I read a book that's actually coming out as a movie later this year, and that is The Martian by Weir. I'm sure all of you have heard of it by now, and it follows a man named Mark Watney who, with his 5 other crew members, are on the planet of Mars for a 31-day mission. 6 days into that mission, they actually have to evacuate the planet, but Mark is left behind because everyone presumes him as dead. The whole story is one for survival because the closest time for rescue, he presumes, is 4 years from now when the next mission in that series of missions arrives at Mars. He has to grow his own food and create more water, literally melding hydrogen and oxygen atoms, and it is a wild ride. I know the term LOL is used a lot with these modern kids nowadays. Cough cough, I just used it in a tweet, but I legitimately laughed out loud at so many points in the novel. My only issue with the entire story actually is the fact that I think that it was longer than it needed to be. Was I entertained throughout the entirety of the novel? Yes. Was I on the edge of my seat waiting to see what would happen to Mark Watney? Yes. But could this story have been cut down? Yes. At some points in the story, it felt like Interstellar in the way that things just kept happening and shit just kept going down. And at every point, you're like, he is so screwed and he is going to die. And no matter how well written, it can get tiring. The last book I read this month was actually a reread, and I didn't actually read it, but I listened to it via audiobook, and that was Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I'm actually rereading via audiobook Cinder and Scarlet, and then I'm going to move on to Crest, which I never actually got around to, in preparation preparation for winter, which is coming out, of course, this winter. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, which actually made the rating go down because it used to be 4 out of 5 stars. I'm just really struggling with this series because everyone talks about the Lunar Chronicles, everyone's been waiting for winter, and everyone says that Cress is where the whole series just takes off and blows up and everything turns fantastic and you are left with nothing but wanting and craving for winter. I, on the other hand, as someone who's only read Cinder and Scarlet up to this point, just don't like the series that much. I've got to admit, it's okay. But it's definitely, in my mind, not worth the hype. I don't know. It seems average. And it just seems like your whole run-of-the-mill dystopia. Quick synopsis, this is a sci-fi retelling of Cinderella. It's told many years into the future, and Cinderella is actually a cyborg, which of course leads to a lot of interesting things that goes on. The basis of what you need to know is that there's a plague going on. The plague is caused by these lunars. They are people with special powers who live on the moon, and they want to take over the entire Earth. I'm just so great at synopsizing. And this is my second time reading it. Anyways, tell me in the comments below how many books you read in the month of August. If you read any of the same ones, what were your favorites, your least favorites. Thank you so much for watching. Keep calm, read on, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye!